The purple-haired woman holds a book open to an intricate, hand-drawn family tree. Panora repeats the name Hollis Hoffen while reading in the library. Looking at the book in horror, Panora thinks she could never forget that name. She recalls the blonde man behind her, realizing she took Hollis Hoffen's life herself. Overwhelmed by memories, she reflects on how she could never forget her actions. Panora clutches her head in disbelief, questioning if her current situation is actually real. She feels as if the man she killed has been completely erased from the world. A sense of dread washes over her as she begins to question the surrounding reality. She remembers the image of the man's lifeless body lying on the ground. Panora stands alone on a high cliff overlooking the sea during a vibrant sunset. Gazing at the horizon from the cliff, she laments having lost everything in her life. Panora contemplates ending her life because she sees no hope or future left for her. Her foot touches the grass as she collapses to the ground in despair. Sitting on the grass at sunset, Panora appears exhausted and broken by her circumstances. Tears well up in her eyes as she struggles with the weight of her misery. Panora screams out in agony, wondering why she is the only one who must suffer. She seethes with anger toward the people who hurt and deceived her in the past. Huddled on the cliffside, she expresses her deep frustration with the unfairness of her life. Clenching the grass, she admits to feeling extremely bitter about her tragic situation. Panora decides that if she must die, she will not go quietly into the night. She resolves to take action since she believes her death is already inevitable. Panora vows to bring down the person she hates most along with her. Panora remembers her neglectful family and the cheating fiancé who broke every promise to her. Panora rejects the idea of forgiveness as she prepares to face her ultimate enemy. She identifies the one man she can never forgive for his betrayal. Panora recalls hitting Hollis with a rock after he tricked her and stole her fortune. The lifeless body of the blonde nobleman lies face down in the grass. Panora realizes that killing a noble is considered the gravest crime in the entire kingdom. She accepts that she will inevitably face a harsh judgment for her murderous actions. In a fit of madness, Panora begins to laugh hysterically at her own dark fate. Looking back at her victim, she thinks about how wonderful she feels after the act. She laughs with joy, wondering how long it has been since she felt this happy. Panora acknowledges that the castle guards will likely capture her very soon. Knowing escape is impossible, Panora dances among falling feathers as if she has no worries. A sinister smile plays on her lips as she fully embraces her dark descent. A glowing yellow system window suddenly appears before her, surprising her with its presence. Confused by the floating light, Panora asks what the strange object is supposed to be. A notification announces that authority is transferred from the deceased Hollis Hoffen to Panora Celsius. An ornate card frame displays a cracked full moon against a dark, starry night sky. Panora reacts with shock as a brilliant light envelops her entire body. She grins as the world around her begins to dissolve into a bright white light. Her consciousness fades as she is pulled into a swirling vortex of papers and light. Panora feels a hand on her shoulder as she mutters about being very sleepy. A maid wakes Panora from a sound sleep, though she begs for just a little longer. She sits up abruptly in bed, her heart pounding as she looks around the room. Her rude awakening comes with a side of sass about her questionable sleeping habits. Panora stares at the maid in confusion, wondering what is currently happening to her. She realizes she is back in her own bedroom and questions why she is there. Panora recalls killing Hollis before losing consciousness, making her current surroundings even more baffling. The maid calls her name while Panora remains preoccupied with her own confusing thoughts. Panora questions why the maid is present when she was supposed to be married. Seal mocks Panora for talking nonsense and claims that she never learns her lesson. Panora is deeply confused about her current situation and wonders where Hollis has gone. Seal asks who she is talking about and demands that she stop sleep-talking immediately. Panora shouts the name Hollis Hoffen, causing the maid to react with utter confusion. Panora realizes that no one in her current reality has ever heard of that man. She walks through the library in silence while trying to process her strange new surroundings. Panora notes with dread that the man's entire existence seems erased from the world. She considers Seal's attitude and the date on the newspaper to confirm her suspicions. Standing among the bookshelves, Panora begins to suspect she has returned to the past. She questions the impossible reality of having come back to her own previous life. Panora observes her reflection in a window and notices that her face looks much younger. She remembers the act of killing someone and stares at her hands in disbelief. Panora pinches her arm to test if the world around her is just a dream. She winces as blood drips from her arm, confirming that the physical pain is real. Panora tells herself that she is not insane yet while processing her incredible circumstances. She looks out at the hallway and concludes that her current situation is not a dream. Panora leans forward with a look of intense focus, deciding she must confirm her suspicions. She wonders if the people who previously framed her will act in the same way. Seal points out the blood dripping from Panora's arm with a look of extreme annoyance. Panora remains silent as Seal complains about the cleaning staff being upset by the mess. Seal slams a glass onto the table while expressing her deep frustration with the situation. The maid scolds Panora for being inconsiderate of how her actions affect those around her.
Panora looks down at her meal, questioning why the maid is treating her so poorly. A simple meal of soup, bread, and meat is laid out on the table before her.
Panora begins to eat while contemplating if she has truly returned to her past life. She takes a careful taste of the soup to see if anything feels familiar.
Panora finds the soup excessively salty and the meat strangely sour, confirming her previous experiences.
She realizes that only the bread is safe to eat, just as it always was. Panora recalls the malicious nature of the people who reside within the noble household's walls.
Sile mockingly asks Panora if she has lost her appetite once again during the meal.
Seal touches Panora's arm and sarcastically comments on the young lady's refined and picky tastes. Panora reflects on how boldly Seal behaves despite her lowly status as a mansion maid. She gazes out the window, reflecting on the painful fact that her family abandoned her.
Panora suspects that her stepmother and stepbrother would be delighted by her current miserable treatment.
She questions what she could have possibly done wrong to deserve such a cruel fate.
Sile acts surprised and pretends to be innocent of any wrongdoing during a past confrontation.
Panora recalls agreeing with the Count during a time when she believed he supported her. A servant calls out to the master of the house in a grand, spacious room. The cook desperately defends her integrity and denies ever tampering with the young lady's food.
Seal joins in the defense, lying about her own involvement in the salted food incident.
Sale fakes a display of tears and claims that she deeply cherishes the young lady.
Young Panora stands beside her stern father as he listens to the servant's desperate pleas.
Panora recalls that her father's only action was to replace the cook without further investigation. She notes with bitterness that Seal was never punished for her part in the harassment. Panora realizes that speaking out against Seal now would only make the ongoing harassment worse. Sile announces she will skip the tea and fetch medicine for the wounds instead.
Seal smiles with malice as Panora anticipates the medicine will cause her immense physical pain.
Panora looks up and calls the maid's name as she prepares to confront the situation.
Panora tells Sunil that she does not need medicine and will be perfectly fine alone.
Panora emphasizes that she does not want Seal to trouble herself with any extra tasks today. Sile smiles with feigned obedience, agreeing to drop the matter since the lady has insisted. A dark aura surrounds Panora as she secretly vows to bury the maid very soon.
Panora stands alone at the window, staring out at the expansive grounds of her family's mansion.
She looks down at her bandaged arms, finally accepting the impossible truth of her rebirth.
Panora recalls killing Hollis, knowing she lacks the connections to hide more than one murder. Panora clenches her bandaged fist as she reflects on the pain of her previous life.
She looks toward the light with a determined gaze, resolving to seize this second chance. The memory of her past nightmare-like life is a burden she can never truly cast aside. A weeping silhouette expresses her intense hatred for the ones who drove her to her death.
Visceral red and white imagery highlights the raw emotional turmoil she still carries within her.
Panora cannot stand the thought of her enemies living carefree lives while she suffered immensely. She acknowledges that killing Hollis was the catalyst for a major realization about her dark fate.
Panora grins while admitting to herself that only revenge can bring her true happiness now.
She exclaims that a devil must have given her another chance to achieve her ultimate revenge. With a blissful look, Panora offers her sincere gratitude to the devil for this opportunity.
Panora stretches joyfully in her room, expressing deep relief at the chance to change her fate.
She laughs hysterically as she hunches over her desk, overtaken by a sense of madness.
Panora takes a breath and decides on the very first priority for her new life. She identifies a specific goal she needs to achieve to get revenge on the maid Sael. Narrator explains the 3 sacred items, Europa for time manipulation and Ganymede for controlling distance. A third item is revealed, shimmering against the backdrop of the dark, starry night sky.
Panora thinks of the item Io, which is said to grant superhuman strength to its possessor.
She recalls a knight being awarded a commendation for discovering Io in her previous life.
Panora realizes that at this point in the timeline, the artifact has not been found yet. She sits in her grand office, knowing that claiming Io will allow her to achieve revenge.
Panora ignores the knight's original destiny since Io is hidden within the Celsius family's territory. She smiles while reviewing documents, thankful that the knight bragged enough for her to remember. Panora turns her head to look at the large clock standing behind her desk.
She focuses intensely, repeating her determination to take the first step toward her dark goal.
A sudden system window and shattering effects startle Panora as she sits at her table.
Panora recognizes the floating system window and asks if it is the same as before.
She reads a prompt about a free portion and realizes her previous experience was real.
Panora asks if it is okay as the system offers her a free portion of a novel.
Intrigued, Panora commands the system to view the content, prompting papers to begin materializing.
A mass of floating documents erupts from the interface and flies into the room. Panora looks back in surprise as the air fills with pages of written text.
A close-up of her eye reveals her intense focus as she begins reading the pages. Panora reads aloud the names of nobles like Vasago and Agaras from the floating text.
Panora identifies Nibirius and realizes all the names in the text are nobles she knows.
She deduces that the system is showing her a novel centered around the character Visago. The text details Visago's 16th birthday and his cousin's defense of a friend after a match. Panora is taken aback by the specific narrative details presented in the magical floating pages. Panora questions if she is in her right mind while reading the impossible information. She decides to write down the information from the window before it can disappear. The scene shifts to a wide view of the grand gray-roofed mansion during the daytime.
A hand holds a newspaper, reviewing the printed reports and current events of the day.
Panora reads the newspaper while reflecting on the reality of the visions she saw yesterday. As Panora wonders if yesterday was real, Seal enters the room and calls out her name. Seal enters the room and announces she has brought water for washing the lady's face.
Panora acknowledges the maid while privately thinking she must prioritize focusing on her plan for revenge.
Panora begins washing her hands while wondering if the item Io is truly in that night's location.
She dries her face with a towel, contemplating the difficult journey required to reach her intended destination. The young woman stands in the darkened room and resolves to find someone easy to manipulate.
Panora hides within the garden shrubbery and watches a man working near a large street nearby. She steps out from the bushes and calls out to the brown-haired man, addressing him as Sir Chatri.
The man is startled and nervously asks if the young lady has come to scold him today. Panora quickly reassures him that she is not there to scold him, causing him to feel relieved.
The man stares at her in confusion as she prepares to explain her unexpected presence in the garden.
Chatri explains he hasn't received his knighthood yet and asks the lady to stop using that title.
Panora clears her throat as she begins to tell the man a story about a missing item. She mentions a specific ring her mother bought for her, using the memory to build her lie.
Chatri listens with concern as she describes how much she enjoyed looking at the ring earlier today.
The man asks if she dropped the ring, and Panora confirms that the precious item is lost. Panora fakes tears and tells the man she is terrified of being scolded by her mother.
She begs him to secretly escort her into the city just once to resolve the ring situation.
Chatri is caught off guard by the bold request, but eventually agrees to help the young lady. Panora leans in and promises to reward his help with a valuable bracelet she holds in her hand.
Back at the mansion, voices discuss a ring while the blue sky suggests a change in time.
Seal brags to another maid about obtaining a ring from the young lady earlier that same day. Seal claims the lady gave her the ring as a token of gratitude for her constant kindness. Panora's inner voice reveals that the maid is lying to her colleague about how she got the ring.
Seal assumes that the lady will not be able to complain even if she stole the ring.
The other maid points out that Panora usually frames and harasses anyone she decides she does not like.
Seal warns her companion that they will be punished if anyone overhears them bad-mouthing their noble master.
The second maid sighs and comments on how Seal is far too nice for her own good.
Seal smiles smugly while looking at her new ring, clearly pleased with her deception and social standing.
The maid walks down the hallway alone and considers if her actions might actually be too risky.
Seal complains about her exhausting chores while reflecting on Panora's lack of redeeming qualities beyond her noble blood.
A dark memory shows Seal looking down at Panora, vowing to give the girl a proper education.
Seal stops outside the lady's door, noting how unusually quiet it is and wondering about other guests. The maid pauses with a look of suspicion as she notices the strange silence coming from the room. Seal admires a grand portrait on the wall and wishes to have a similar painting of herself someday. A violent shattering sound echoes through the hall as a heavy object suddenly falls from the high ceiling.
Seal stares in horror at the broken tray and food scattered across the floor in a dark pool.
Servants gather around a fallen chandelier and express relief that the accident did not start a fire.
A servant notes that one of their own has been crushed to death beneath the massive iron fixture.
The master of the house demands to know the cause of the sudden and fatal equipment failure.
A worker displays a broken metal piece, explaining that a vital part of the pulley system snapped.
The master argues that the iron could not have shattered unless it had been rusted for years.
He insists that the chandelier was far too sturdy to fall so easily without some external interference. Whispering voices fill the hallway outside a partially open door as the staff discusses the tragic news.
Panora hides behind the door and covers her face while listening to the servants gossip about Seal.
A sinister smile appears on Panora's face as she lets out a quiet laugh at the news.
Two maids discuss the accident, confirming that the servant Seal died during the chandelier's sudden fall.
The servants remark that Panora seems deeply affected and has not even lit a lamp since yesterday.
Panora lies motionless on her bed in the darkness, pretending to be paralyzed by grief and shock.
She reflects on how frustrating it is to deal with so many watchful eyes within the mansion.
Panora stretches out joyfully, feeling a surge of triumph and wanting to celebrate her successful first move. Panora raises her hand in anticipation as she prepares for the next phase of her plan.
Lying in bed, Panora reflects on Shutri's gambling addiction and how easily he can be manipulated.
She considers how a debt-ridden man like Shuri would desperately desire the valuable necklace she holds.
Panora knows that even if he exchanged the jewelry for money, his wealth would not last long. Hiding in the trees, she reveals that she obtained the artifact Io without arousing any suspicion. Despite her success, Panora sits on the floor and experiences a sudden moment of somber reflection.
She laughs hysterically, finding dark joy in the memory of the panicked expression on Seal's face.
Panora recounts her plan, noting the aging chandelier and the servant's presence in the dining hall. She reveals her intent to use Eo's superhuman strength to throw an iron shard at the chandelier. The massive fixture shatters and falls, successfully crushing her target amidst shards of glass and blood. Triumphant in her room, Panora lets out a sharp laugh at her successful and violent first move. She settles onto her bed, feeling a wave of intense satisfaction as her revenge begins to unfold.
A sudden, sharp agony strikes her, accompanied by mental flashes and a sense of physical distress.
Panora gasps in horror as her arm feels as if it is being torn violently apart. She realizes the excruciating pain is the steep price required for using the sacred power of Io. She recalls a memory of a man warning that the artifact brings only pain to its user. Panora wonders what horrific price she would pay if she used the artifact for longer durations. Time passes as the scene shifts to the Grand Mansion windows a few days later. Mirroring her internal frustration, Panora sighs about the burden of attending a wedding for unfamiliar nobles. She stands tall, reminding herself that eliminating Seal was only the beginning of her grand revenge. Panora's expression hardens into a cold smile as she resolves to continue her path of vengeance. She arrives at the wedding venue, viewing the event as a necessary step for her future goals. Panora identifies her next immediate objective, finding a way to refuse Nibirius' looming marriage proposal. While sitting at a table, the looming shadow of a man appears behind the young noblewoman. Guests nearby chatter excitedly, praising the splendor of the wedding and the beauty of the venue.
A woman and a young boy discuss how lovely the current setting is compared to others.
The young boy suddenly stops mid-conversation, his attention caught by someone at a nearby table. He approaches Panora and asks if she has been faring well since they last saw each other. The boy is revealed as Panora's half-brother, Pearlson Celsius, who notes they haven't spoken in ages. Pearlson questions why his sister chose to accompany them to the wedding event so suddenly today. Pearlson's expression shifts as he watches Panora closely, his gaze becoming increasingly suspicious and intense. He leans in close, mockingly asking Panora what kind of face she intended to show today. Panora glares back, internally noting that her brother would have forced her attendance regardless of her wishes. The priest declares the holy matrimony while the crowd cheers for the newlywed couple in the garden. Panora sits silently, ignoring the celebration while focusing entirely on her own hidden, dark motivations. The surrounding nobles socialize and drink, discussing your plans to deepen political and social ties. Panora slips away from the crowd, her feet moving quickly across the green grass of the garden. She wanders deep into the hedge maze, using her memories to locate a very specific location. Her eyes sharpen as she spots her target, confirming she has arrived at the correct spot. A man walks nearby, contemplating his strategy after noticing the Count was displeased with his recent proposal. Panora approaches the black-haired man with a polite curtsy, offering him a seemingly graceful greeting. The man, dressed in a grand military uniform, stands tall as Panora makes her sudden presence known. He coolly acknowledges her presence and expresses relief that they did not physically collide with each other. He dismisses her and continues walking, leaving Panora behind as she maintains her polite, noble facade.
Panora watches him depart, observing that the man currently displays absolutely no interest in her whatsoever.
The man's attendant spots a handkerchief Panora purposefully dropped on the ground and alerts his master. The man scoffs at the handkerchief, dismissing it as a cliché and old-fashioned attempt to gain attention. The attendant picks up the fabric and examines it while his master orders him to discard her. The man's expression shifts to one of shock as he catches a glimpse of the handkerchief's embroidery.
He grabs the cloth, bewildered that a woman he just met could know such a guarded secret.
The embroidered handkerchief is clearly addressed to Duke Roses Sarlia, signaling a very calculated move. Orokin orders an investigation into the woman's family while resenting his younger brother's impending inheritance. Orokin walks away from the fountain as a servant bows respectfully in his presence. He crushes the fabric in his gloved hand, feeling deeply provoked by the woman's bold actions. Orokin considers if he should execute her for the blatant disrespect shown to his ducal house. He states that her punishment will be determined by the explanation she eventually offers him. Panora walks through the garden as Orokin watches her from a distance and speaks again. Orokin introduces himself as the eldest son of House Sarlia during their first formal conversation. Panora identifies herself as a member of House Celsius, and Orokin coolly acknowledges her status. Orokin explains that he has come to return the item she dropped like a gentleman.
Panora offers her things for the return of the handkerchief as they stand together.
Orokin stops her from leaving, stating that he has one important question to ask her. He demands to know why she chose to insult him in such a specific manner. A tense silence falls between the two nobles as they stand in the sunlit garden. Orokin questions her claim about not knowing his status as the rightful heir of the region. Panora denies any intent to insult him, but Orokin argues that the victim determines the offense. Panora offers to explain her actions and apologizes if she has caused any genuine offense. Orokin maintains a stoic expression and commands the young lady to proceed with her explanation. Panora admits that she purposefully created a reason to speak with him regardless of the risks.
Orokin asks for clarification on whether she intentionally provoked him just to secure this meeting.
Panora warns him that his younger brother, Lord Rosis, is planning to steal his inheritance.
She claims the Duke has chosen the younger brother as his successor in his secret will.
Orokin dismisses her words as groundless nonsense, but Panora insists that she has undeniable evidence. Panora claims that she received this sensitive information directly from the Duke of Sarlia himself. Orokin expresses disbelief and asks where she could have possibly met the Duke to hear this.
Panora claims she overheard the information while passing by the Duke at a noble council meeting.
Orokin calls her delusional and threatens to inform her father about her provocative and strange behavior.
Panora notes his lack of surprise and realizes he already suspected the truth about the succession.
Narration confirms that the Duke's death is imminent and the title will pass to the brother. Dark rumors circulate among the nobilities suggesting that Orokin killed his brother for the ducal title.
Panora asks him to listen to one final point before he decides to have her executed.
Orokin sighs and agrees to hear her out, mocking her for being so remarkably brave.
Panora asks him if he is aware of the specific illness currently affecting the Duke. She questions what he would be willing to do to extend his father's life.
Orokin laughs in disbelief, questioning how she has discovered so many of his private family secrets. Panora expresses her sincere desire to assist in the Duke's recovery through her hidden knowledge. Orokin asks where the necessary medicine can be found, but Panora refuses to reveal everything yet.
He points out the absurdity of her expecting trust while she keeps her information a secret.
Panora claims her knowledge of the future and his family comes from her study of astrology.
She privately admits she cannot actually see the future and hopes he accepts her lie.
Orokin contemplates the mention of astrology while looking at the woman with a thoughtful expression. Panora thinks he is dumbfounded by her claim but reiterates she can delay the Duke's death.
Orokin realizes she is negotiating and asks what kind of compensation she wants for her help. Panora confirms that she is indeed seeking a specific reward in exchange for her assistance.
Orokin notes that no one offers such significant help in this situation without having ulterior motives.
He asks once more for her to name the specific compensation she desires from him.
Panora remains silent for a moment as the weight of the negotiation fills the air. The garden scenery serves as a peaceful backdrop for the intense political bargaining taking place.
Panora makes her bold and ultimate demand for him to agree to become her future fiancé. She asks him to enter into a formal engagement with her as the price of her help. Panora leans in and whispers her bold proposal directly to the skeptical black-haired noble. The young woman's eyes reflect a deep-seated weariness and cold determination for her plan. Orokin rests his chin on his gloved hand, silently weighing the risks of her offer.
Orokin admits that rumors rarely sway him, but her detailed knowledge clearly surprises him.
Orokin mockingly questions her sanity, while Panora realizes he is essentially calling her crazy. The man prepares to deliver a rebuttal, noting that her timing is unfortunately quite poor. Orokin coolly informs the lady that he has already selected a candidate for marriage.
Panora maintains her composure, asking if there is a specific person who holds his affection.
Orokin's golden eyes narrow as he observes the woman's reaction to his blunt rejection. He explains his pragmatic approach, noting that several noble houses would serve his political interests.
Panora exhales a sigh of relief, realizing her proposal isn't competing with true love. She clarifies that her request is for a strategic alliance rather than a genuine marriage.
Panora suggests a temporary engagement lasting only 2 or 3 years to achieve her goals.
Orokin questions her true motives, asking what benefits she gains by buying this temporary time.
Panora reveals that she is currently facing a marriage proposal that she needs to avoid. Her expression darkens with intense loathing as she confesses her deep hatred for the man.
Orokin asks if she wants the proposal broken, while she notes her parents' predictable greed. Panora confidently explains that the suitor will move on once a higher-ranking fiancé appears.
Internally, she admits her explanation is a partial truth to protect her path to vengeance. Panora views this calculated deception as her only way to escape the looming nefarious engagement. She acknowledges the necessity of tricking Hanal to ensure her plans for revenge stay hidden.
She recalls Hanal's warning that her claim to succession remains as long as she stays.
Hidden nearby, Panora overhears a servant and the Countess plotting to kill her if the marriage fails.
Returning to the present, Panora suggests they might develop feelings if they spend together.
Orokin stands firmly between the garden pillars and declares such an outcome will never happen.
He laughs at her persistence, questioning if her reasons for this deal are truly firm.
Shadow falls over Panora's face as she prepares to double down on her dangerous gamble.
The young woman stands her ground, her gaze unyielding despite the man's dismissive laughter.
Orokin watches her closely, his sharp eyes searching for any sign of hesitation or deceit. The nobleman laughs again, seemingly amused by the sheer audacity of her elaborate scheme.
Orokin smiles, noting that their pragmatic values seem to align perfectly for a mutual deal.
He ironically suggests they could become an ideal couple, leaving Panora visibly stunned by him.
Panora wonders if his mocking tone indicates he is actually agreeing to her daring terms.
Orokin agrees to the engagement, but insists it wait until the Duke's health shows improvement. Orokin challenges her to immediately demonstrate the validity of her medical knowledge to secure the deal. The man waits for her response, his expression unreadable as the negotiation reaches its peak.
Panora tells him to ensure the Duke eats no fruit as her first piece of medical advice. She suggests placing mint oil in tea so the patient can gradually inhale the medicinal vapors. Panora asserts that these specific measures will lead to an improvement in his father's condition.
Orokin's tone turns menacing as he asks if she will accept the consequences of failure.
He leans in close, demanding to know if she will take full responsibility for outcomes. Panora boldly offers her own life, suggesting he could physically maim her if she fails. Panora offers her family's total ruin, prompting Orokin to wonder at her ruthless lack of empathy.
Orokin questions her ultimate endgame, wondering what she will do once the deal is done.
Panora considers her other options, but decides that keeping Orokin as her ally is best. Orokin finally accepts the deal, surprising Panora with his sudden and definitive change of heart. He announces a ball at his villa and promises to send an invitation very soon. Orokin states he will provide the results of their bargain then, as Panora offers thanks. He admits curiosity about her methods, but decides to save his deeper questions for later.
Panora's gaze hardens as she reaffirms to herself that every move is for her revenge.
Panora clenches her blue dress, resolving to prepare a believable excuse for her future knowledge. The young woman realizes she must carefully mask her insights to avoid triggering Orokin's suspicions. Orokin calls out to the startled Panora as she stands by a massive garden pillar. A close-up shows the black-haired man's gloved hand reaching out to touch Panora's hand.
Orokin demands that Panora not disappoint his expectations while looking at her with a steady gaze.
He asks the lady how she plans to explain their engagement to the suitor she is dumping. Panora looks back with a calm expression, stating that she will offer a simple explanation. She cheekily suggests she will tell everyone that their union was love at first sight. Having finished the conversation, Orokin turns and walks away through the sun-drenched garden pathways. Panora enters a social gathering, relieved that she will no longer have to tolerate Nibirius. The young woman wonders about the identity of the noble lady Orokin was originally meant to marry. Holding a glass of wine, Panora recalls that Orokin remained unmarried in her previous timeline.
A sudden shout of her name causes Panora to jump, causing red wine to splash everywhere.
The blonde man, Nibirius, approaches and asks where she's been hiding while he was searching. Panora realizes she completely forgot that Nibirius would also be attending this wedding celebration. She lies to the blonde man, claiming she was simply enjoying a walk through the garden.
Nibirius mocks her interest in nature, assuming she was staring at bugs on flowers again.
The man dismissively tells her to stop her creepy hobby immediately while looking away in annoyance. Panora grips her skirt and offers a cold, brief confirmation to avoid further conflict with him. Nibirius notes his relief at finding her and suggests they go have some tea together. Panora attempts to decline the tea, but Nibirius insistently pulls her toward a table anyway. She looks at his face, reflecting on the time when Nibirius still seemed relatively kind. In a flashback, Nibirius kneels and swears eternal love while proposing marriage to a younger Panora. A younger Panora looks away, admitting that she does not yet understand the concept of love. Nibirius reassures her, claiming that affection is something that naturally grows after a couple is married. The blonde man consistently whispered sweet, deceptive words of devotion throughout their early relationship. He claimed she was beautiful, but his personality shifted once the engagement was final. The flashback shifts to a dark scene of physical aggression as Nibirius' true colors finally emerged. Nibirius cruelly asked Panora who else besides him would ever agree to take her as a wife. He told her she should be grateful he even treated her like a human being. Narration confirms he cheated repeatedly and conspired with House Hollis to frame and ruin the lady. Returning to the present, Panora sighs and acknowledges her past foolishness for ever choosing such a man. Panora sharply pulls her arm away, rejecting Nibirius' physical contact as they stand in the garden. The purple-haired woman stares at him coldly and announces that she has something important to say.
Nibirius asks if they can talk after sitting down, clearly annoyed by her sudden change in attitude.
Panora firmly refuses his request, stating that she has no intention of going anywhere with him.
Nibirius is taken aback and asks if she has been offended by something he did.
Panora repeats the word with a dark, narrowed gaze, her anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Memories of his past abuses fill the air as she thinks there are too many offenses to count. Nibirius scratches his head in confusion, asking her to specify exactly what he has done wrong. He tries to claim fiancé privileges, but Panora reminds him they have no formal marriage promise. A close-up shows Nibirius' eye twitching in irritation as he struggles to maintain his composure. The blonde man sighs and asks why she is being so nitpicky about their relationship status today. Panora informs him that even between romantic partners, basic decorum and respect are absolutely necessary. She thinks it is laughable that a man who treated her so poorly is now mentioning.
Panora gives a dismissive, cynical smirk, telling the man to give her a break from his nonsense.
She abruptly turns to leave, using the excuse that her mother has likely returned to the party. Panora walks away with a determined stride, leaving Nibirius standing alone in the garden. Nibirius watches her depart, wondering if she is simply playing hard to get to gain his attention. The scene fades out on the peaceful garden architecture, contrasting the tense argument that just occurred. Panora reflects on her plan to keep Nibirius hooked until she gets a definite answer from Orokin. The young woman considers the necessity of her current method as a servant enters the room. The blonde maid asks if she would like some tea, and Panora politely accepts the offer. Narration explains that Panora was wary of the new maid at first, but she never harassed her.
Panora is relieved she no longer has to drink tea that tastes like plain hot water.
While drinking, she reflects on dying in her past life without enjoying such simple comforts. Panora dismisses the servant for the day, and the maid acknowledges the order before leaving. A close-up shows the lady setting her empty teacup back down onto the matching floral saucer.
The purple-haired woman sits alone in the quiet room as a ticking sound fills the air.
Panora realizes the moment has arrived as a bright, golden light suddenly illuminates the entire room. Narration notes that several times in the middle of the night, a mysterious novel has appeared. Panora confirms the novel always appears at midnight on Sundays as she reads a single page. The woman sighs deeply upon discovering that the book's content is focused entirely on Visago. The name Visago Geldern is featured prominently against a radiant, golden background within the book. Narration describes Visago as a pinnacle of high society and a target for Panora's eventual revenge.
Panora realizes that the events in the novel are in perfect sync with her current timeline.
A man in the text claims he exists on a different level than side characters like Panora.
Panora confirms the man she took revenge on in the past definitely said those arrogant words. She reflects on her memories, confirming the villain's past insults match the dialogue in the book. In a flashback, Panora asks why she is suffering from being tricked and framed by him.
Hollis mocks her as a side character destined for suicide, justifying her use for Visago's sake.
A close-up of Panora's face shows her stunned expression as she begins to believe the impossible. Panora realizes her world is a novel where Visago is the protagonist of the entire story. Looking out at the rain, she processes the truth that she is living inside a book. The young woman is visibly shocked, exclaiming that this revelation cannot possibly be the truth. Panora considers how Hollis rose to power by acting as if he already knew the future. An old document shows Hollis's success was based on his ability to predict and prevent disasters. Exhausted by the truth, Panora slumps back on her seat and lets out a heavy sigh. She wipes sweat from her forehead, realizing her life was decided by a pre-written scenario. A close-up of Panora's eyes shows her grim determination as she accepts the undeniable reality. She reflects that if this is the case, Hollis's actions and the novel fit perfectly together. Panora stands amid swirling papers, connecting her regression to the appearance of the future-revealing novel. She grows angry thinking her life was ruined simply because of a predetermined literary scenario. Panora resolves that rewriting the scenario would count as a legitimate act of self-defense for her. Panora confirms the situation to herself as she looks distressed while preparing for her next move. She recalls using a search for someone named Io as an excuse in a previous conversation. A decorative crest introduces the upcoming event, the celebration of the king's birthday. Panora notes she must attend for appearances despite her status as a nuisance to the family. The maid brings a dress for the lady who says she is coming to see it. The servant addresses Lady Panora before entering, and the lady calmly grants her permission to proceed. Panora thinks about a person named Ranwei as she prepares for the upcoming birthday celebration. In the hallway, the servant boy asks if no more dresses are coming for the lady. The blonde maid confirms that they have received the final dress for the mistresses of it. The male servant is shocked, noting there were very few dresses provided to begin with. He warns that the lady might get angry and bully the maid over the lack of options. The blonde maid looks bewildered by the boy's warning about her mistress's potential bad temper. The servant admits she was initially worried too as she considers the truth about Panora. She notes she cannot be certain about the bullying rumors despite what people commonly say. A thought bubble highlights that Panora actually gives her staff plenty of breaks during work. The maid concludes that Panora is an ideal master because she respects professional boundaries. Panora walks through the garden, her expression unreadable as she contemplates her next move. A male servant informs the lady that her carriage requires repairs before she can travel.
The brown-haired servant stares in wide-eyed confusion as the mistress responds with unexpected calm.
Panora smiles cryptically while mentioning her intention to visit the home of the head butler. The green and gold carriage sits outside a large, half-timbered house on a bright day. Entering a dim room, Panora greets Ranwei, who is currently confined to his bed. The elderly man coughs and apologizes for his inability to properly host the noblewoman. Panora watches him, privately noting that the butler still seems strong enough to stand up. A dark aura surrounds Panora as she cruelly decides to help him sleep eternally instead. In a flashback, a younger Panora weeps while a maid demands to know the reason. The maid, Seal, blames the girl for her own troubles just as Ranwei enters. The three look at each other in a sudden moment of tension within the room.
Sai lies about the situation, but the child screams for help and exposes the deception.
The young girl cries out that the maid has been treating her in an awful way. Panora begs the butler to inform her parents about the ongoing abuse she is suffering.
Ranwei dismisses the girl's pleas, coldly telling her not to take her behavior too far.
He ignores the child's cries and leaves with the maid, leaving Panora alone and helpless. Returning to the present, Panora recalls how the butler always viewed her as a troublemaker.
Ranwei asks what business brought the lady to his bedside so suddenly during his illness.
Panora feigns deep distress and worry as she addresses the man who once ignored her. She claims she could never ignore the suffering of a longtime servant of her family. The purple-haired woman leans in and asks the sick butler how he is currently feeling.
Ranwei admits that he has recovered slightly after having the opportunity to rest in bed.
Panora reaches into a basket, preparing to offer him a gift she brought for his recovery.
A close-up reveals several large golden fruits identified by the lady as poplar fruit.
She describes the fruit as nutritious, though narration notes it worsens the disease Ranwei has. Ranwei eats a piece of the fruit and remarks on how fresh and delicious it tastes. Panora encourages him to eat his fill and not hold back while he is recovering. Her face is cast in shadow as she insists he eat plenty of the harmful fruit. Narration explains that the disease killing the butler had no known cure for many years.
Panora reflects on how the man died from the illness before a remedy was ever found.
The unsuspecting butler thanks the woman for her kindness while he continues to eat the fruit.
Panora laughs brightly and tells him not to mention it, hiding her dark intentions perfectly.
She privately resolves to keep visiting to ensure the butler's life is shortened as much as possible. A sudden, powerful force erupts in the woods, sending a cloud of white dust into the air. Panora pants heavily after practicing, her hand throbbing with a painful glowing light she just used.
She collapses in the forest, struggling to handle the intense physical strain of her holy power.
Despite the pain, the woman acknowledges that the power she possesses is undeniably useful to her.
Panora smirks at a shattered stump, noting that brute force is only one path to revenge. Now dressed in a rich red gown, Panora silently reads a letter she is holding. The document confirms that Ranwei's physical condition is continuing to decline just as she planned.
Panora realizes the poplar fruit effectively poisoned him and begins planning her next steps.
She sighs and considers the necessity of preparing the rest of her schemes very soon.
Panora asks her maid, Cecil, when her mother plans to depart for the day's event.
The maid provides the time, and Panora notes they must start getting ready for the banquet.
A close-up shows a hand selecting red jewels for the king's birthday celebration banquet.
Panora smiles while holding a brooch, determined to meet a specific person at the royal party. The king stands on a high balcony, waving to the cheering crowd gathered below him. Nobles at the celebration admire the king's appearance as the festivities begin in the hall. Panora observes the monarch, thinking his impressive physical build rivals that of a younger knight. Narration describes the king as a warmonger who ignores his citizens' well-being. The House of Andras is introduced as the kingdom's powerful military defenders. Panora scans the ballroom for the specific person she intends to find. She identifies the older Andras brother by the distinctive scar on his face. Panora notes she is actually seeking the younger brother who should be nearby. As Panora moves through the hall, a nearby noblewoman appears visibly upset.
Panora approaches the distraught woman and asks if she is feeling all right.
The woman fears encountering a man who has made her life miserable. Her companions question her about a broken engagement, which she tearfully confirms. The woman describes her former fiancé's extreme violence and animalistic behavior. Panora walks away after hearing the gossip, her target's location becoming clearer.
She realizes the man she's looking for is hiding from his former fiancé. Panora leaves the main hall to search the quieter areas of the palace.
Her search leads her toward a secluded staircase that is rarely used. Rumors about the Andras family suggest they are terrifying and beast-like individuals. Panora acknowledges their reputation as battle-crazed fanatics, but expects the rumors are exaggerated.
She rounds a corner in the dimly lit hallway and spots a figure.
Panora smiles confidently, knowing that public rumors rarely reflect the whole truth. A hand holds a golden heart-shaped pendant as its owner sits in solitude.
Finding Carl Andras on the stairs, Panora hears him claim he's just bored. Carl smiles while explaining that he was merely passing time with his necklace.
The young man appears slightly embarrassed as he continues to lounge on the steps. Panora surprises him by asking if he's hiding from his ex-fiancé's presence.
Carl laughs it off, admitting the situation while taking responsibility for the fallout.
Watching him, Panora reflects on how his genuine smile hasn't changed over time.
Carl grows curious and asks if the lady has a reason for finding him.
Panora stares at him intently, preparing to deliver her unconventional and blunt proposal. She tells him she is looking for a dog, much to his confusion. Carl is bewildered, asking if her pet ran away during the royal celebration.
He offers to help her find it, but Panora immediately rejects the suggestion.
Panora shows a rare, warm smile as she reveals her true, hidden intentions.
She specifies she wants a loyal hunter who will follow her every command. She addresses Carl Andras directly, identifying him as the dog she is seeking.
Panora confirms that he is exactly the person she came to the party for.
Stunned, Carl points to himself and asks if she's being serious.
She offers him the title of servant if being called a dog is offensive.
Carl scratches his head, wondering if her words are just a strange metaphor. He jokingly asks if her request involves playing fetch or other literal tasks.
The mention of something called Europa triggers a sudden, intense reaction from Carl. Carl recalls a past meeting where he first encountered the purple-haired young lady.
Panora promises that she has the means to obtain Europa for his benefit.
Overwhelmed by the offer, Carl asks if she truly knows how to get it.
Panora smirks, telling him she is willing to give it to him personally.
In a memory, a young Panora sits alone in a secluded garden area. A mysterious person wearing a dark sleeve reaches out toward the hiding child. A small tied pouch is tossed onto the grass near the surprised young girl. The young girl quickly retrieves the dropped item as the stranger walks away.
She notices his red cloak and recognizes it as the Knightly Order's uniform.
Carl returns the item to her, marking the beginning of their shared hidden history.
Carl takes the pouch, wondering if the items inside were also in his pocket.
The young girl asks if the pouch also belongs to the red-haired boy.
Carl admits he was searching for something more valuable, and Panora suggests retracing his steps.
Carl mentions coming from the mansion's annex, surprising the girl with the long distance.
Carl becomes distressed, explaining that losing his niece's necklace might cause his sister to kill him.
Panora tries to calm him, but Carl insists his sister is a truly dangerous person.
The boy despairs over his lost item while the young girl watches him with concern. Realizing the necklace's value, Carl fears theft, so Panora offers to help him search.
Sunset hues fill the sky as the boy expresses his deep gratitude for her help.
Carl bows deeply, vowing never to forget her kindness while the girl modestly dismisses it.
Introducing himself as the third son of Andros, Carl invites her to contact his house.
The girl realizes with shock that the boy belongs to a family with terrifying reputations.
Noticing someone nearby, Carl tells Panora he must leave and begin heading back.
Carl departs with a final thank you as narration recalls his habit of overpaying favors.
Recalling their shared history, the adult Panora smiles and reaffirms her trust in him.
Returning to the present, Carl asks if she truly knows where the sacred Europa is. The young man pauses to ask for her name and the noble house she represents.
Introducing herself as Panora of House Celsius, she curtsies while Carl asks for proof.
Panora identifies the bull earring as the key piece of evidence he needs.
Carl reacts with surprise as Panora reveals that the earring is actually Europa's true form.
Narration explains that the relic Europa possesses the power to interfere with the world's time. A glowing aura surrounds a figure as narration describes Europa's ability to grant eternal life.
Panora recalls how Carl's desperate search for the relic became a rumor among the nobility.
Gulping nervously, the young man asks if she is truly willing to give it to him.
Panora questions his level of desire, and Carl intensely confirms he absolutely must have it.
Panora reflects that his desperation is only natural given his family's dark and short-lived history.
Carl looks down as narration reveals that many members of House Andros die very young.
Rumors among nobles suggest the Andros family's high mortality stems from their obsession with battle.
Panora looks at Carl, knowing he is no exception to his family's battle-hungry nature. She suggests he could live longer without the relic if he simply changed his lifestyle. Carl sadly notes that she clearly understands the nature of the cursed Andros bloodline. Panora clarifies her terms after Carl fears she might forbid him from ever fighting again.
The purple-haired woman reiterates that her only condition is that he becomes her dog.
Panora promises to hand over Europa on her 18th birthday if he accepts her deal. Carl agrees to the deal despite noting the strangeness of her specific and blunt condition.
Before finalizing the promise, Carl stops her, indicating there is something else he must check. The orange-haired man suddenly leans forward, bringing his face dangerously close to the startled Panora. Panora freezes in surprise, wondering why he has closed the physical distance between them so suddenly.
Carl gazes intently at her, his expression unreadable as he addresses her by her full title.
He seeks final confirmation that becoming her dog will truly earn him the sacred relic. Panora suspects his intense proximity is a sign of doubt caused by her youthful appearance. Meeting his gaze directly, Panora confirms her commitment to the deal with a simple yes.
Carl visibly relaxes, expressing his relief at her answer as the tension in the room fades.
He smiles brightly and tells her she doesn't seem like the type of person who lies. Carl enthusiastically declares that he will follow and serve Lady Panora from this moment forward.
Panora is taken aback, internally questioning why the young man chose to believe her so easily.
She reflects on how much faster the persuasion went than expected due to his extreme desperation.
Panora notes that historical wars were fought for centuries by people seeking such powerful sacred relics.
Carl smirks, claiming he would gladly become anything to obtain the item in just a few years.
Panora accepts his pledge, naming him Carl and welcoming him as a comrade in her schemes.
Panora tells Carl they must confirm his sincerity before they move forward with their deal.
Carl agrees to the name while Panora demands absolute secrecy even from his family. Carl promises to keep their secret and tells Panora she may speak her mind freely.
Clenching her hands, the purple-haired woman admits she still cannot offer him her full trust.
Panora reflects on how betrayal is most painful when it comes from an unexpected source.
The orange-haired man remains silent as he listens to Panora's honest and cold admission.
Panora turns to leave, explaining that a mission will serve as the necessary confirmation. Carl stares at her, asking what specific task he must perform for this mission.
Panora instructs Carl to challenge a gambling man named Shutri to a martial arts duel.
Carl accepts the task and asks if there is anything else he must do afterward.
Panora warns him that he must accept all consequences and responsibility for the duel's outcome. Carl pensively repeats the man's name as he considers the nature of his new target.
Shatri's gambling addiction eventually forced his hidden, malicious true nature to surface for all.
As Panora worries about Shatri's desperation, Carl asks her if anything is currently troubling her. Carl seeks to understand why Panora chose him specifically to be her partner in crime.
Panora answers that his deep desire for the sacred relic Europa made him the choice.
Carl is shocked, stating he has never shared his need for the relic with anyone.
The young man demands to know how Panora could have discovered his most private secret.
Panora realizes her mistake in assuming his desire for the relic was common noble knowledge. Carl waits in tense silence for an explanation as the mystery of her knowledge grows.
Panora smiles and lies, claiming she just searched for whoever would pay the highest price.
She rhetorically asks if there is anyone alive who wouldn't desire a powerful sacred item.
Carl is satisfied with her logical explanation and expresses his relief at her blunt reasoning.
Panora notes his family background makes him the perfect candidate for such a dangerous trade. The young man abruptly stops walking as he contemplates the potential consequences of their alliance.
Carl expresses concern that their frequent private meetings might eventually tarnish Panora's noble reputation.
He passionately vows to do his best so she never feels any shame for him.
Panora stops him, firmly stating that there is nothing shameful about being associated with him.
Carl turns his head away, seemingly moved by her unexpected and kind defense of him. A profound and meaningful silence settles between them as they reflect on their new partnership.
Panora watches him closely, trying to gauge the true feelings of her newly acquired dog.
Carl laments that others view his love for combat as a sign of a violent nature.
He clenches his fist tightly, suppressing the frustration of being misunderstood by his noble peers.
Smiling sadly, Carl admits that he truly has no friends to turn to for support.
He explains that his isolation is exactly why he was hiding alone on the stairs.
Panora asks the young man if he is aware of the dark rumors surrounding her. She looks at the gossiping nobles, doubting that this gentle smiling man could ever be violent.
The two stand in separate windows as Panora addresses Carl by name, deepening their bond.
Carl tells her not to worry about the petty rumors or gossip of the nobility. Walking away, Panora questions why being violent is seen as a negative trait in him. The purple-haired woman offers a radiant smile that seems to stun the young man completely. Carl's eyes widen in awe as he gazes at the genuine expression of the woman. Panora explains that her primary reason for choosing him as an ally was quite simple.
She leans in and tells him she trusts that he is a man of his word.
Narration reveals a tragic past where Carl died prematurely at the young age of 20.
Panora walks down the hall, regretting that she could never thank him in her first life. Now back in time, she is determined to finally use the opportunity to save him. Carl smiles brightly, unaware that Panora is acting out of gratitude from a previous timeline.
Night falls over the servants' quarters at the Celsius estate, where a lone figure rests.
The bandaged man groans in immense pain as he struggles to recover from his injuries. Footsteps echo through the darkened hallway as a lone figure approaches a wooden door.
Panora gazes silently at the bandaged man lying vulnerable and asleep in his bed.
As she enters, Panora notes that the man was careless enough to leave his door unlocked. Panora remarks on his lack of caution, warning that such negligence invites dangerous consequences. The injured man groans and twitches in his sleep, consumed by a vivid and painful nightmare. Observing his struggle, Panora decides that his current state provides the perfect chance to strike. Suddenly, the man's hand shoots up and tightly grips Panora's arm, stopping her in mid-motion. Startled and coughing, Shatri demands to know her identity and what she is attempting to do.
Panora curses her luck under her breath, her eyes widening as she realizes she was caught.
A blinding radiance erupts from Panora's hand as she unleashes a hidden, devastating magical power. Sometime later, Panora reflects that the current events haven't deviated from the original novel's plot. Panora turns her head as urgent shouting echoes from the hallway, disrupting her quiet moment. Servants carry the battered Shatri, who complains loudly about his broken ribs and inability to walk.
Shatri rants about the brainless brute who attacked him, his face contorted in anger and pain.
Watching through the window, Panora notes with satisfaction that Carl successfully completed his specific mission. Panora concludes that the severity of his injuries will keep the man bedridden for several weeks. Praising the legendary strength of House Andras, Panora prepares to take the final step of her plan. Dark, ominous clouds gather over the Celsius estate as the atmosphere grows heavy with impending news.
Panora asks her maid, Cecil, why the mansion is so noisy and if something has happened.
Cecil hesitates, her expression troubled as she struggles to find the words to answer her lady.
Panora urges Cecil to speak, reminding her that she is her only trusted source of information.
Bowing her head, Cecil agrees to inform Panora of the tragic events that have just unfolded. Cecil delivers the grim news that Shatri has died, causing Panora to gasp in feigned shock. The maid explains that Shatri's internal organs ruptured following the tournament, leading to his sudden death. Panora laments the dangers of knighthood, noting that she has heard of fatal duels occurring before. Cecil reports that the Count intends to sue the attacker due to the duel's excessive violence. Panora reflects on the power dynamic, noting the attacker is a high noble while the victim was a commoner. Dismissing the legal threat, Panora assumes Carl will only face a minor fine for the incident. Panora tells Cecil she can dismiss herself and take a rest for the remainder of the evening. Alone, Panora marvels at the relic Eo's ability to kill a trained man despite her own surprise. The young noblewoman prepares to eat a light snack as she continues her internal calculations.
Panora eats calmly, thinking about the unexpected level of resistance she faced during the secret encounter. She realizes that her initial estimation of her own strength was slightly off during the brief struggle.
Panora examines the red marks on her arm, wondering how to best handle the visible evidence. She concludes that the light scratches are merely the result of Shutri's desperate and final counterattack.
Panora worries that Cecile might eventually become suspicious of her movements if she isn't more careful.
As she eats, the woman continues to replay the moment she successfully countered his last-ditch effort.
Panora recalls that the ancestors of House Andras were known as the kingdom's shield and spear.
She muses that it's likely the family also mastered deadly assassination techniques throughout their long history.
Panora considers that Carl's unique skills might make him the perfect person to ask for future help.
Standing up, Panora decides that she must visit Ronway before his condition takes a final turn.
Panora thinks it would be a missed opportunity to not see him one last time before death. The purple-haired woman walks through the grand estate, her mind focused on her next calculated move.
Cecil appears at the door, surprised to see Panora preparing to leave her room so late.
Panora explains that her visit is necessary because Ronway's health is reportedly showing no signs of improvement.
Cecil immediately offers to prepare a carriage for the journey, which Panora accepts with a thank you.
Panora devises a plan to bring along some cheap medicine as a facade for her hifit.
A voice calls out to Lady Panora, echoing through the hallway and stopping her in her tracks.
Cecil rushes toward Panora, her face showing signs of stress as she interrupts her lady's departure. The maid informs a surprised Panora that an unexpected visitor has arrived and is asking for her.
Panora turns her head in shock, questioning the identity of the unexpected arrival.
Cecil presents a sealed letter on a tray, announcing that visitors have arrived simultaneously.
Orokin stands outside the mansion gates, his expression calm as he waits for Panora.
Panora hurries down the grand staircase as servants acknowledge her presence in the hall.
Walking past the staff, Orokin declines their hospitality and plans a very short stay.
Panora arrives at the bottom of the stairs, meeting Orokin's steady and expectant gaze.
Orokin offers a small smile, informing Panora that he is here to collect her. Orokin requests that the servants leave them to discuss private matters regarding their alliance. The pair stands alone in the courtyard after the mansion staff retreats into the building.
Panora expresses her bewilderment at his sudden visit and his surprisingly direct behavior.
Panora recalls proposing a contract engagement to Orokin during a previous, more formal meeting.
Orokin asks if she had been anticipating this outcome since their earlier private discussion.
The black-haired man acknowledges the situation with a simple and knowing verbal confirmation.
Orokin credits her medical treatment for his father's return to consciousness and improved health. He confirms that a formal proposal letter was included with the earlier message he sent.
Orokin kisses Panora's hand, officially declaring himself her fiancé as they stand together outside. Panora reflects on how quickly she resolved the issues with Shutri and the engagement.
She wonders if the world is finally siding with her, enabling her escape from Naberius.
Orokin invites Panora to accompany him immediately to meet his father at their villa.
Panora is stunned by the request, her eyes wide as she processes the sudden invitation.
The purple-haired woman questions if they are truly intended to depart for the journey now.
Orokin looks slightly surprised by her hesitation while they remain standing closely together.
Panora notes that this man consistently acts without warning, like a pop-up ad for marriage.
Orokin explains that his father's health has been unstable, necessitating her immediate presence. He notes his father remains delirious and emphasizes his desperate need for her specialized skills.
Panora remains silent, considering the weight of the request and her new official role. Orokin reminds her of her status as his fiancé, expecting her full cooperation and assistance.
Panora accepts the responsibility, confirming her willingness to help him with his father's recovery.
A horse-drawn carriage travels across a scenic, sun-drenched meadow filled with vibrant wildflowers. Peering out the window, Panora notes that this visit marks her first time in St. Paul. The carriage passes through the ornate gates of a secluded and highly prestigious country estate.
Narration identifies the location as the villa where Orokin's father, Duke Sarlia, is recuperating. Stepping onto the grounds, Panora admires the magnificent architecture of the Duke's private villa.
Orokin approaches Panora from behind as she takes in the impressive sight of the estate. The black-haired man asks if she exited the carriage alone and without a proper escort. Orokin warns that declining an escort is improper for a woman of her noble standing.
Panora laughs softly, admitting she's become too accustomed to managing things on her own.
Orokin simply acknowledges her explanation with a brief and somewhat skeptical verbal response. Orokin begins to speak as the scene shifts to the villa's grand interior library.
Orokin asks if purchasing the specific items on her list will satisfy his father's needs.
Drinking her tea, Panora confirms the medicinal requirements are surprisingly simple to acquire and prepare.
She warns that full recovery is unlikely because the underlying illness has already progressed significantly.
Panora notes that while full healing is difficult, his chronic coughing should finally begin to cease.
Orokin asks Panora to reveal the specific name of the disease afflicting his ailing father.
Panora looks away, hesitating as she avoids giving a direct answer to his blunt question.
The young woman remains silent, her expression guarded as she considers how to respond.
Setting her cup down firmly, Panora clarifies her purpose wasn't to identify the specific illness.
A tense silence fills the library as the two allies face each other across the table.
Orokin rejects the engagement if she cannot name the disease she is treating.
Orokin demands the truth, warning that his patience with her secrecy is rapidly running out.
Panora remains silent as she processes the tension building between her and Orokin.
Orokin claims his information regarding the treatment originated from a specific group of travelers.
Panora presents her notes, explaining she learned the epidemic's cure from the same wandering people.
Orokin eyes her with skepticism, questioning if she simply heard the cure from others.
The purple-haired woman confirms his suspicion with a direct and simple verbal affirmation.
Panora explains that she gave the mysterious illness the arbitrary name cough of agony.
Panora feels relieved that she prepared this specific deception in anticipation of this very confrontation.
Panora recalls reading about Gustav's disease but fears precise details might expose her previous actions.
Panora points out the treatment's success while Orokin reacts with a brief, dismissive laugh.
Orokin marvels at her audacity to challenge his household using only hearsay instead of expertise.
The black-haired man remains deeply impressed by Panora's calculated and daring nature during their meeting. Panora requests that Orokin keep the details of their current discussion a strictly guarded secret. She explains that rumors of her associating with wandering travelers would be socially damaging. Orokin responds with a knowing smile, finding her careful management of her reputation quite remarkable.
Orokin admits he never expected his future fiancée to act like a common fortune teller.
Panora glances away, her expression unreadable as she considers his comment about their engagement.
The woman asks if he intends to question her reasons for choosing him as her fiancé.
Orokin stands, stating the motive is obvious. Power is the primary benefit of their union. A hand grips the furniture tightly as the conversation between the two allies reaches a peak.
Leaning in, Orokin notes that his family's illness provided him with the necessary leverage.
Panora dismisses his talk of leverage, but Orokin insists that the technicalities do not matter.
The scene focuses on the back of Orokin's head as he continues his intense explanation.
Orokin declares that a person must use any means necessary to obtain what they truly desire.
Touching her shoulder, Orokin observes that he and Panora share very similar methods and mindsets.
He concludes that their shared traits suggest they will thrive together as husband and wife.
Duke Sarlia awakens in his bed, weakly calling out his son's name to the room.
Orokin rushes to his father's side, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude for his sudden recovery.
Watching the emotional reunion, Panora notes that the Duke looks completely different than he did before. Panora observes the scene, privately agreeing that she and Orokin truly are alike in their goals. A close-up highlights Panora's focused gaze as she monitors the Duke's reaction and recovery. The Duke notices the unfamiliar woman in the room and asks Orokin to identify her.
Lifting her skirt in a polite curtsy, the purple-haired woman introduces herself to the Duke.
Orokin explains that Panora traveled there specifically to pray for the Duke's health and recovery.
The Duke credits her prayers for his health and encourages her to stay close to Orokin. Orokin mentions he planned to speak with his father only after he had fully recovered. While the Duke coughs, Orokin clarifies that Panora is far more than just a simple friend. Orokin officially presents Panora to his father as the woman he intends to marry.
Panora is caught off guard by the bluntness of his announcement to the ailing Duke.
The Duke questions his son's marital intentions while Orokin promises to explain the full situation.
Orokin politely asks Panora to step outside and wait while he speaks privately with his father.
Standing in the sunlit garden, Panora reflects on how well her plans have unfolded so far.
Orokin joins her, expressing his deep relief that his father survived the critical illness.
He assures Panora that he will handle the task of persuading his father to accept them.
Orokin offers to start the formal engagement procedures immediately if she is ready to proceed.
Panora reacts with surprise to his sudden urgency, questioning if they should start so soon. Watching him closely, Panora wonders if his high spirits are solely due to his father's awakening.
Orokin proposes holding the official engagement ceremony during the upcoming summer months.
Panora agrees to the timeline and tells him to handle all the event's specific arrangements.
She emphasizes that she has no desire to be consulted on the dress or venue details.
Panora warns that her former fiancé might become suspicious if she uses her noble title openly.
Panora and Orokin stand close together in the garden, maintaining their intimate conversation.
The purple-haired woman asks how she should address him now that they are officially engaged. Orokin leans in closer, his presence looming over Panora as they speak privately. Orokin requests that she call him simply by his name, wanting to dispense with formal titles. Panora privately admits that she cannot bring herself to trust him completely despite their alliance. She reflects that her lack of trust is irrelevant as long as he serves her purposes.
Panora decides she will partner with anyone if it ensures her revenge proceeds as planned.
Night falls over the grand villa while Panora remains resolute in her calculated path for vengeance. Returning to the mansion, a young man confronts Panora about her late-night whereabouts.
The brown-haired boy lectures her, claiming her unescorted outings damage the family's fragile dignity.
Panora listens to his complaints with a cold, detached expression, clearly unmoved by his scolding.
The young man expresses frustration that she has only just returned after being away so long.
He demands that she say something in her defense while she maintains a defiant silence.
Panora feigns distress and asks for forgiveness, putting on a performance to pacify the upset boy.
She explains that her absence was due to a sudden summons from the young duke.
Panora clarifies that she traveled specifically to the villa belonging to the influential Duke Orokin. The boy is visibly stunned, questioning if she truly went to see the powerful Northern Duke. Panora calmly reveals her intention to enter into a formal engagement with Duke Orokin. She walks past the speechless boy, leaving him to process the shocking news of her alliance.
The young man is left bewildered as Panora retreats further into the mansion alone.
Entering the hallway, Panora lets out a sigh of relief at having handled the initial confrontation.
Her expression shifts to one of surprise as she encounters another person in the corridor. An older, stern-looking man with blonde hair approaches her with measured, heavy footsteps.
Panora wonders if the Count is concerned for his son before politely greeting him as father.
The Count acknowledges her return, his gaze intense as he addresses the young woman.
He stands before her, a commanding and imposing figure within the dimly lit mansion hallway.
Panora continues on her way while the Count remains stationary, watching her walk away.
The Count dismisses any concern with a brief remark as Panora exits the immediate area.
Panora reflects that this cold family dynamic is nothing new to her as she climbs the stairs. Later, Cecil the maid meticulously brushes Panora's long purple hair in her private dressing room.
Cecil brings up the topic of the upcoming birthday banquet and the plan surrounding it.
The maid shares that the Count intends to publicly announce the engagement to Lord Orokin then.
Panora calmly instructs Cecil to inform the Count that she has no issues with his plan.
She privately critiques the Count for choosing this moment to act after his long history of selfishness.
Panora considers that her social debut might mark her final day within the confines of Ronway.
Panora suddenly stands and announces her plan to visit Ronway later that very same day. Cecil looks down with a troubled expression, clearly hesitating to speak her mind to her mistress.
The maid nervously confirms she understands the request while her anxiety remains visible.
Panora notices the maid's odd behavior and asks if Cecil is feeling physically unwrapped. Cecil clenches her hands tightly, struggling with a difficult question she wishes to pose.
The maid admits there is one specific thing she feels compelled to ask her lady. The two women face each other in the ornate room, a heavy silence hanging between them.
Cecil questions if the current path Panora is taking is truly the right one for her.
The maid sweats from the tension, fearing the reaction to her uncharacteristic meddling.
Panora gazes at her maid with a curious and unreadable expression as the tension peaks.
Cecil recalls her 5 years of service, reflecting on her professional detachment during that time.
She remembers treating the mansion as just a workplace where she never intended to make friends. A close-up highlights Cecil's internal conflict as she observes her mistress's unusual nature. Cecil concludes that Panora is far more complex and different than any other noble she has served.
She thinks of someone who has been devoted to the household since their early childhood.
Panora adamantly declares that she could never simply ignore someone in such a dire condition.
Cecil remains silent, her expression filled with a mix of deep concern and visible hesitation.
Cecil questions Panora about the frequent accidents that have been occurring within the household lately. Panora notes that recent events have provided her with much-needed time for quiet reflection.
Panora reflects on Seal, recalling how the woman was always insincere and unkind toward her.
She remembers that despite Seal's coldness, Cecil was the only one who remained loyal.
Panora acknowledges that Cecil was the sole person consistently by her side at the estate. Smiling gently, Panora expresses her sincere gratitude for Cecil's unwavering support during those difficult times. Cecil looks on with a stunned expression, clearly moved by her mistress's unexpected display of warmth.
A memory of the staff working highlights how deeply shaken Panora was by past events.
Gripping her dress, Panora explains that those traumatic experiences forced her to change her perspective.
Panora tells Cecil that it is vital to show gratitude while people are still alive. Cecil watches her mistress with a pensive look, reflecting on her own role and duties.
Later, the maid enters the kitchen, drawing the immediate attention of the busy cook. The cook asks about Cecil's business and inquires regarding the young lady's current whereabouts.
He notes that Panora has been going out frequently to visit the former head butler. The cook mentions hearing that Ronway's illness has worsened, prompting the young lady's recent visits.
He recalls rumors of Panora's harsh temperament, but Cecil remains silent about her lady's behavior. Noticing Cecil's quiet demeanor, the cook asks if she is feeling all right after the discussion. Cecil defends her mistress, stating that Panora has treated her with nothing but genuine kindness. She explains that Panora even granted her rest, leaving the cook confused by this change. Cecil considers if she should believe the old rumors or trust her own recent experiences. She insists there must be reasons for Panora's past actions that others simply do not understand. The cook listens intently, his expression unreadable as he processes the maid's defensive words.
He admits that Panora hasn't harmed him personally and considers that she might be good.
A green carriage travels down a paved road toward a cluster of modest village houses. Inside the carriage, Panora wonders why Cecil suddenly questioned her motives and character today.
Panora sits in silence, her hands folded as the carriage continues its rhythmic journey forward.
She reflects that constantly creating excuses for her actions has become a truly exhausting task. Upon her arrival, a local man watches as Panora steps out of her elegant carriage. The man greets her, assuming she is there to see the patient in the usual room.
Panora walks past him with a determined look, heading toward the entrance of the humble dwelling.
Entering the room, Panora announces her arrival and mentions she brought fresh fruit for Ranwei.
Inside, the elderly Ranwei is hunched over on his bed, gripped by a violent coughing fit.
Panora rushes to the sick man's side, placing a steadying hand on his back for support.
She asks if he is all right as he struggles to catch his breath between heavy coughs. Panora privately laments the lack of caregivers present to look after the man in his condition.
Ranwei warns her to stay away, fearing she might contract his illness if she touches him.
Panora reassures him that she has visited many times before without suffering any ill effects.
Ranwei looks down, exhausted and pained by the reality of his isolation and deteriorating health. He notes that despite medical advice, people are terrified to approach him because of his state.
Panora gazes at the former butler with deep sadness, moved by his lonely and difficult situation.
Ranwei offers a weak apology for his condition and the poor state of his current surroundings.
A close-up reveals the old man's weary eye as he looks toward his visitor with gratitude. Panora brightens the mood by showing him the fruit and suggesting they share a meal together. She moves toward the window, commenting on the pleasant weather and the need for fresh air. With a swift motion, Panora's hand pulls back the heavy green curtains to let light in. Opening the window wide, she expresses hope that the fresh breeze will help soothe his coughing.
Ranwei sits quietly on his bed, watching Panora as she stands framed by the bright window.
Panora turns back to him with a gentle smile, asking if he feels even slightly better. Panora turns from the window and calls Ranwei's name, questioning his sudden and heavy silence.
A close-up of the young lady's eye captures her sudden realization and overwhelming sense of shock.
Ranwei gazes back at her with tears streaming down his face, visibly overcome with emotion.